Good morning. So I used to have what's called a black thumb. If you're not familiar with the term, a black thumb is the opposite of a green thumb. If you have a green thumb, it means that every plant that comes into your care grows and thrives. If you have a black thumb, it means every plant that comes into your care tends to die. So every year, for Mother's Day, my husband would get me an orchid. And every year, by Father's Day, that orchid was in the trash. Now, I wasn't one of those people that just gets a plant and forgets about it. Quite the opposite. I wanted so badly to be good at caring for plants. And so any sign of distress that the plant might have shown, droopy leaves or getting a little yellow, I would jump right in there and I would try to fix everything. I would change it all. Now, any of you who are plant moms or plant parents know exactly what I did wrong. Because if it had little droopy leaves, I'd start watering it every day, I'd repot it, I'd change the pH of the soil, I'd put more fertilizer in, I would do it everything and just shock the plant to death, basically. You see, I wanted so badly to be good at growing plants that if I could have jumped into that pot and started growing for the plant myself, I would have done it. You see, I had this energy of wanting to control everything. Maybe you resonate with that. Imagine my surprise when I started to learn this lesson and realized that I needed to let go of control a little bit. Imagine my surprise when that didn't apply just to plants in my life. So what I learned from raising orchids and getting better, I have one now that's 2 years old, still alive. Thank you very much. Orchids are tough, right? So what I learned is that whether it's raising plants or our own spiritual journeys, we have to learn to trust the process. Life is an unfoldment of that divine light within us, that Christ light. And this unfoldment happens in divine order. I've heard it said that we are not human beings, but human becomings. That we are not born static. We're not predestined or trapped by our genetics or upbringing, but that we have choice. We can choose. And through our thoughts, words, and actions, we can change our lives. We can grow and we can unfold more of that Christ light within us. I think that's one of the greatest lessons that unity teaches, is our ability to choose, to change, and to grow. Sue Sicking, who is a unity minister and author, wrote, "The unfoldment of the individual is the purpose of life, and this unfoldment is in divine order." That just as a tiny seed unfolds and grows into a big plant, so too is our life journey, that same unfoldment from a seed into a big plant, from being born into our death. We are constantly unfolding that light within us, constantly growing and changing and becoming a greater and greater expression of the person that we were meant to be. There was a time in my life when I felt like I had missed my exit. I had gotten onto the wrong path, and it was too late to turn around and go back. There wasn't a way to get back on the right path. It felt like I had made a mistake and there was no fixing it. That I was stuck on this road that I found myself on. Have you ever felt that way? It can be a time when we feel like we've made a mistake or we missed an opportunity or we started going down a road that ended up not being what we thought it would be. Sometimes it can feel like, well, I started digging this hole, maybe I'm supposed to keep digging. Or Is it too late for me to change? In those times in my life, I find great comfort in the words of Eric Butterworth, a Unity minister. He says, "You can never make a wrong choice or a wrong decision. For any choice you make will provide the circumstances necessary for you to transcend the level of consciousness from which the choice was made." I'm going to read that first part again. You can never make a wrong choice or a wrong decision. Let's breathe into that. Does that feel good? Like a weight's lifted off your shoulders? So Maya Angelou says this a different way. She says, "Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it." So often, if we find ourselves in a situation that we don't want to be in, we stall ourselves with guilt and with shame that we've made a mistake, that we've gone a wrong way, that I made the wrong choice. But Eric Butterworth says you cannot make a wrong choice or a wrong decision. Because that choice, the consciousness from which you made that choice, will unfold if you trust the process into expressing more and more of that Christ light that you are. So whether it's saying something you wished you hadn't, passing up an opportunity that you later regret, or sending yet another orchid to an untimely grave, these are not deviations in our path, but part of the process, part of your unfoldment, which happens in divine order, not our order and timing, divine order. As we unfold throughout our lives and our consciousness grows, perhaps we find that our next step is to make amends with somebody, to be aware of the opportunities that are all around us, or to care for the plants or the things that are entrusted to us in newer and different ways. Whatever choice we make sets the ground, Eric Butterworth says, for our consciousness to expand and for the next perfect choice to come after. So by forgiving ourselves and seeing our life purpose as that continual unfoldment, we are no longer paralyzed by guilt or by shame, but we can move forward because we trust the process. So I live in Phoenix, and in Phoenix we have saguaros. Are you all familiar with saguaros, those iconic cactus with the arms? There's a lot of really interesting facts about saguaros, and I want to share one of them with you. And this is the story of how a new saguaro is born. So you all probably know that saguaros are really, really old, right? It takes about 75 to 100 years before they'll get their first arm. So if you're driving down the 17 and you get past Sunset Point and you look around and there's all of those saguaros that all have these big arms and are tall, it seems like, wow, we're so abundant in saguaros here in Arizona. But let me tell you the process that has to happen for a new saguaro to be born. Every year in late April or early May, the saguaros get these little green buds on top of their crown, so on the top of them. And then those buds will eventually open up into these beautiful white flowers. Have you ever seen it? Yeah. So those flowers are called the saguaro blossom. It's actually our state flower here in Arizona. And like all flowers, they need to be pollinated. Except they're not pollinated by bees or by hummingbirds. The saguaro blossoms are actually pollinated by bats. So it's a 3-inch long bat with a 3-inch long nose that actually lives most of its life in Sonora, Mexico. But every year it migrates north through the Sonoran Desert, pollinating the saguaro blossoms as it goes. So if a saguaro blossom is successfully pollinated, it closes up into a little bulb again, and then in late June it'll open back up, and this time it looks like a bright red flower. Only it's not a flower, it's the saguaro fruit. And inside that fruit are hundreds of thousands of tiny little black seeds. seeds that will become, possibly, a new saguaro, about 1% of the time. But the story's not over yet. Those black seeds, if you were to pluck one and put it on the ground, would not become a new saguaro. Each of those seeds has around it a thick husk that needs to be destroyed in order for the seed to be able to germinate. So if a coyote or a javelina eats that fruit and eats those seeds, no new saguaro. But if a cactus wren, Arizona's state bird, eats one of those seeds, their digestive system removes the husk and leaves the seed intact. The story doesn't end there. The cactus wren has to deposit that seed underneath a palo verde tree or a bush because a new saguaro needs shade in order to grow for its first years when it's young and fragile. And that's still not the end of the story. Once that seed lands in the perfect spot in the desert, we need rain within 3 days. And then and only then is a new saguaro born. And it'll take 5 years before that saguaro grows its first inch. And it'll be 40 years before you can look across the desert and see that there was the perfect year where the rainfall and the blooming of the saguaro blossoms from down in Mexico all the way up to central Arizona happened at the right and perfect time, where the bats were able to migrate and pollinate, where there were enough cactus wren born the season before to be able to eat those seeds, to be able to destroy that husk, and then the rain came again at the exact right time. So many tiny, perfect little things that have to happen exactly right for a new saguaro to be born. Do you think the saguaro has any idea? Do you have any idea how many tiny little things have lined up so perfectly for your growth and your unfoldment? You know, it can be a little disheartening as somebody who's trying to become a better plant parent to raise succulents. Somebody told me that cactus and succulents are like one of the easiest plants to take care of. That has not been my experience. Now, do you know how disheartening it is to care so deeply for this little succulent in a pot in my home, and it's really struggling? And then I look out my back window, and there in the desert with nobody helping them, these succulents are just thriving and growing. I have a theory about this. My theory is that the reason cacti and succulents thrive out in the wild and are so difficult to care for as houseplants is because when we put them in a pot, they're disconnected from the whole. Life is so much easier, and we tend to thrive so much more when we realize that connection we have to the bigger picture. Trusting Spirit and our place in the bigger picture is what opens us up to this broader perspective. And this broader perspective not only invites divine wisdom to flow through us so we can make good choices and unfold that light within us. Having a broader spiritual perspective has actually been shown psychologically to buffer us against depression. Seeing ourselves as not separate, as not the ones in control who have to do it all on our own, but as part of the greater whole, part of nature, part of oneness, where we have no idea all of those tiny little things that are just falling into place perfectly in divine order for our good, for our unfoldment. Eric Butterworth says, "You are a child of the universe. You do not walk your path of life alone. The whole universe walks with you. It is dynamically involved in you. Its dynamic flow is ever expressing as you." I believe that this is true. Whether we know it or not, whether we believe it or not, whether we accept it or not, that it is true that you are the point at which the entire universe expresses as you. Trusting the process doesn't do anything or change anything about some God out there. Trusting the process is about allowing the God in here to come forth more vibrantly, to come forth more clearly. And I'll tell you what, trusting the process is a lot more peaceful than trying to control every little thing. So trusting the process isn't about doing something for God, it's about doing something for yourself. To be in the flow of life. To have a trust like the saguaro does. That even though it's so complicated, even though there's so many things that have to go right for your growth and your unfoldment, trusting that it will happen in perfect order. The Center for Action and Contemplation is Father Richard Rohr's ministry. Are some of you familiar with it? There's a writing that I found on his website that I really loved. It says, at the core of Jesus' life and message was this good news. The Spirit of God, the Spirit of aliveness, the wind, breath, fire, cloud, water, wine, dove Spirit who filled Jesus is on the move in our world. And that gives us a choice. Do we dig in our heels, clench our fists, and live for our own agenda? Or do we let go, let be, and let come, and so be taken up into the Spirit's movement? So I'm inviting you today to trust the process, to trust your unfoldment as a life purpose, as a natural thing that happens, that just as a seed grows into a big plant, so too do we unfold in that right and perfect way. Know that you are connected with all of life. Forgive yourself for any mistakes that you felt like you made, because you can't make a wrong choice. You can't make a wrong decision. And you can't know your role in the bigger picture. So let go, let be, and know that Spirit expresses as you, through you, in each and every moment. So this week, I want to invite you to notice where you are trusting the process, where you're in that flow and that level of trust. And notice where you're not. Notice where you've got your heels dug in, your fists clenched, and ask yourself, how is life, how is God, how is Spirit inviting me into trust in this situation? And affirm for yourself, I trust the process. Let's affirm that together. I trust the process. And so it is. Amen. Let's take a breath as we prepare for meditation. Taking a moment to intentionally and consciously get comfortable in your chair. Relaxing your shoulders, your hips, your neck. Taking a moment to truly settle in, to relax. And I invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze, whatever feels most comfortable for you. Let's take another slow, intentional inhale, completely filling your lungs, and a slow, complete exhale. As you relax into this space, this moment, start to turn your attention inward to that space where you feel the presence of Spirit. that deep well within you of peace, of calm, of trust. Allowing your breath to gently guide you deeper and deeper. Allowing thoughts to float in and out without attachment. Focusing on that inner space of peace. As we take a moment to relax, to connect, and to sit in sacred silence. As we take this time in silence, we are reminded of the Spirit of God that dwells within, through, and as us. And as you begin to come out of meditation, coming back to this time and this space, I want to leave you with a poem from Meister Eckhart, a 14th century Christian mystic. It is your destiny to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels. How is this possible? How? Because divine love cannot defy its very self. Divine love will be eternally true to its own being, and its being is giving all it can at the perfect moment. And the greatest gift God can give is its own experience. Every object, every creature, every man, woman, and child has a soul, and it is the destiny of all to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels, to be as God is. So it is.